There is no quick clarification. No official sentence usually appears to dampen rumors. It was precisely for this reason that this news was felt to shake. Hybe called shocked after learning that Jimin had left for Japan without clear internal notice. Not as a public agenda, not as part of a promotional schedule, but as a personal decision that goes beyond the usual flow known to the public. This information spread quickly, not because of the big leak, but because of the awkwardness. In a highly structured industry, where every artist's movement is usually neatly recorded, a sudden trip without full coordination feels like an anomaly. And precisely therein lies the tension. It's not about breaking the rules, it's about changing patterns, something that rarely happens, especially with a figure like Jimin. Sources close to the situation describe the internal atmosphere as awkward silence. There is no open anger, no conflict on display. There's just confusion. Why now? Why Japan? And why without the usually heavily guarded lines of communication? Those questions arise not out of suspicion, but rather because this decision feels very personal, very unusual, and very deliberate. That Jimin's trip to Japan itself is not a mystery when viewed from the previous series of events. Taehyung and Jungkook had been there in an atmosphere away from the spotlight. No big agenda, no official appearance. They chose silence. And so, when Jimin caught up, and did so without announcement, many saw it as a natural continuation, not an emotional shock. But for a big system like Hybe, the move still feels out of the ordinary. What makes this situation even more interesting is the attitude of all parties after the news circulated. There is no strong objection. There is no statement confirming that the information is false. The silence made room for one conclusion: that this trip was indeed not designed for public consumption, and perhaps not entirely within the framework of the official agenda either. For some industry watchers, this moment marks something deeper than just a journey. This is a rare instance when a global artist chooses to move based on personal needs, not professional structure, not a form of defiance, but rather an affirmation of limits. A silent message that there are spaces in life that cannot always be scheduled or agreed in advance. Hybe itself is known as a company with a neat and planned management system. So the so-called shock that occurs is not a sign of weakness, but rather a human reaction to something that is not recorded on the planning board. Jimin is not an artist. Each step has its weight, and when that step is taken silently, the impact is even greater. Among fans, the reaction was mixed. Some are surprised, some are worried, but not a few who feel this step is very Jimin. He is known as a person who prioritizes feelings, who dares to take difficult decisions when he feels it is necessary. A trip to Japan, in this context, is read not as a careless act, but rather as a necessity that cannot be postponed. Speculation is also growing. Some suspect that this trip is closely related to Taehyung and Jungkook's emotional state. Others see it as an important moment in BTS's internal dynamics that is rarely seen publicly. But most agree on one thing. Whatever the reason, this decision was born from the depth of relationships, not the interests of the image. Interestingly, there is no sign that Hybe is trying to retract this narrative. There was no attempt to turn it into an official agenda on the spur of the moment. It is as if there is a realization that some things do not need to be completely controlled, that on some scale, trust should be given. Even when the decision comes unannounced, that Jimin's departure to Japan without the full knowledge of the agency is not scandal. It does not bring conflict, does not create noise. Quite the contrary, it brings a silence that forces all parties to pause and realize one important thing. Behind the great structures and global names, there are human beings with real needs. And that's probably what shook the most. Not the fact that Jimin left, but rather that he could leave. That at some point, personal decisions still find their way, even in a system as big as Hybe. The world may never know what really happened in Japan. But one thing has become clear: the silent move has opened up a larger conversation about boundaries, trust, and the humanity behind an industry that often forgets that its stars are only human, too. The silence after the news emerged only reinforced how unusual this situation is. In an environment accustomed to moving quickly to control the narrative, pauses become a language in themselves. Many people consider that Hybe's surprise was not due to loss of control, but rather to the realization that there were decisions that were born outside the mechanism they were used to. And that decision came from someone who had been known to be the most obedient, the most reflective, and the most cautious. Internally, the atmosphere is said to change to a calmer one after the initial phase of confusion. There is no attempt to exaggerate the situation. It was precisely the realization that Jimin's trip to Japan was not intended to challenge the system, but rather to meet a need that could not be postponed by meetings or layered approvals. In an all-planned world, there comes a moment when humanity precedes structure. Many observers see this as a subtle but important shift point. For many years, BTS has been known as an ideal example of cooperation between artists and agencies. Disciplined, coordinated, and almost without gaps. So when a step is taken beyond that pattern, the impact is felt not because of the magnitude, but because of the symbolism. This is not rebellion. This is an affirmation that even in the best systems, personal space remains. Jimin himself did not give any signals before departure. No cryptic uploads, no ambiguous messages. That attitude actually reinforces the impression that this trip is not meant to be read by the public. He didn't want to make it an event. He just wanted to do it. In many ways, it's a rarely seen form of honesty, acting without the need to explain. The context of Taeyoon and Jungkook's presence in Japan makes this move feel even more plausible. Both chose silence first, and Jimin chose to follow without making any new noise. For some, this is the purest language of friendship, to be present when needed, without waiting for an official invitation. In a world that always demands permission, the choice to come quietly feels powerful. Among fans, the conversation shifted. It's no longer about right or wrong, it's about empathy. Many write that they do not need explanations, that they trust the intentions behind the move. There is a collective understanding that if someone like Jimin takes this kind of silent decision, then the reason must be important. Hybe, on the other hand, is called choosing a non-reactive approach. No attempts to correct the situation, no reframing. Their silence feels like a tacit acknowledgement that some decisions do have to be respected, even if they come without perfect procedure. In long-term relationships, trust is sometimes tested not by major conflicts, but by unexpected small steps. The trip also gave rise to a broader discussion of the boundary between public roles and private needs. Jimin is not just a global artist. He is an individual who has spent most of his life under the spotlight. His decision to leave without full notice feels like a reminder that emotional health can't always be scheduled, that if you look at it from the outside, it's probably just one flight. Yet for those who have followed BTS's dynamics for years, this feels like a moment when silence speaks louder than any statement. No one knows what happened next, and probably doesn't need to know. What is clear, the move has taken place, and the world can only read its meaning from a distance. In the end, Hybe's shock is not a story about loss of control, but rather about the meeting of two realities, the system and man. And at that crossroads, Jimin chose to be human first. A silent decision that will probably not be recorded as an official event, but will be remembered as the moment when personal honesty found its way, even in the most structured